Hello? I can see your face. What are you doing? Okay. Now I will move on to chapter 16 and then review the main points in the chapters. Capital structure basic concepts. Look at this chapter. So what are main points? It's here. The first main point you should review in the chapters that the impact of financial leverage on the EPS and ROE. Yeah. The first main point in the chapter 16, you have to review, but please review the impact, the effect, influence of financial leverage on EPS or ROE, earning per share, and the ROE, return on equity. Yeah. You understand this example? Yeah. Do you remember this example? This example shows you there is a company, and this company is considering the two capital structures. Current capital structure without debt, we call the unleveraged capital structure, and proposed capital structure with debt, leverage capital structure. Do you remember that? Again, there is a company. This company is all equity company, and this company is considering two capital structure with debt and without debt. So you need to know how do we investigate the impact of financial leverage on the EPS and the ROE. Yeah. You can calculate the EPS and ROE under the current capital structure without debt. And you can calculate the EPS ROE under the proposed capital structure with debt. Right? With debt. And then we have a general equation to compute the EPS. The relationship between the EPS and the EP, the interest payment, tax rate, preferred dividend, and number of common share outstanding. Right? So here, you know how do we calculate the EPS if we have EPIT? And how do we calculate the EPIT break-even point? What is the EPIT break-even point? A break-even point at the level of EPIT where the both plants will produce the same EPS. Yeah, the break-even point. Break-even point. So maybe in the final exam, they will ask you to calculate the EPS if you know EPIT. Furthermore, they will require you to calculate the break-even point. EPIT break-even point. How do? You will calculate the EPS, EP, under the plus one, plan 2, and then put EPS of the plan 1 equal to the EPS of plan 2, and then you can solve EP, break-even point. Right? That's the first main point. To check your understanding, please do the question 4 and question 6. Question 4 and question 6. Yeah, do you remember question 4 and question 6? We did it already, but I don't know you remember or not. Open your book, question chapter 16. For example, question 4. We did it already, but I don't know if you remember or you forget everything. Here, question 4. Yeah, break-even EPIC. Do you remember that? If you have EPIC, you know how do we calculate the EPS? They give you the two plans, plans 1 and 2. Plans 1, all the equity. Plan 2, that the capital structure with debt. And then they require you to calculate the EPS under each capital structure. And then they identify the break-even EPIC. You know how do you do? Yes or no? Yeah. If you don't know how do you do, open the solution of chapter 16. Look at this and try to understand at least the answers. Question 4, or similarly, question 6. Question 6. However, in the question 6, we have three plans, 1, 2, and 3, not only 2. Three capital structures. Yeah. And they ask you to calculate the EPS, identify which the three plans had the highest EPS, the lowest. Identify which capital structure will produce the highest or lowest EPS. Yeah? And then identify break-even point. Okay? Similarly, first main point again. The first main point in chapter 16, you have to review. What is it? That the impact of financial leverage on the EPS and ROE. You know how do we calculate the EPS if you have an EPIC. Yeah? You know how do we calculate the EPS if you have an EPIC. And keep in mind that maybe in the formula sheet, we don't have this formula equation. You have to learn by heart. Yeah. And how do we calculate, how do we compute EPIC break-even point? Break-even point of EPIC at the level of EPIC, where both capital structure will produce the same EPS. Yeah, you have the same EPS. Yeah, that is the first main point. You have to review carefully. The second main point you have to review that the MM theory without tax and MM theory with tax. Now, MM theory without tax, as you know, the MM theory states that the value of leveraged firm is the same as the value of unleveraged firm. If we are living in the perfect market, well, the value of leveraged firm is the same as the value of unleveraged firm. Our capital structure does not affect firm value. Our firm value is the same under the different capital structure. Yeah. You have to review MM theory. Remember assumptions of the MM theory. There are the many assumptions of MM theory. MM theory assumes that we are living in the perfect market. But what's perfect market? That the perfect competition. Firms, investor can borrow or lend at the same rate, no transaction cost, and no taxes. Yeah. And if we are living in the perfect market, the capital structure does not affect firm value. Or firm value doesn't change under the different capital structure. Capital structure is not relevant to the firm value. Yeah. The value of leveraged firm is the same the value of unleveraged firm. Okay. You understand strategy A and B was homemade leverage. What is it? What's a homemade leverage? Well, actually, the homemade leverage is a personal leverage. Or you will use your personal machine, the homemade leverage, right? Again, you know the impact of capital structure on the firm value in the perfect market and the imperfect market. Or that you can state, you can indicate MM theory with tax and without tax. Without tax, the value of leveraged firm equal to the value of unleveraged firm. Okay. And the VU, how do we calculate the VU? The value of unleveraged firm, the EP, divided by RUO, return on equity. Proposition 2 of NM theory without tax. Yeah. And with tax, do we have? With tax. If we are in the imperfect market, not the perfect market, there is corporate tax. If there is corporate tax, value of leveraged firm equal to the value of unleveraged firm and plus present value of tax shield. Value of unleveraged firm plus present value of tax shield. And how do we calculate the present value of tax shield? Present value of tax shield depends on the corporate tax and depends on the debt level. You know that. And here, proposition 2 of NM theory. Now, when you calculate the cost of debt after tax. Okay. To sum up, the second main point in the chapter 16. The first main point, do you remember? The impact of financial leverage on the EPS and ROE. You can calculate the EPS if you know the EP. You can calculate the EP break-even point. The second main point in the chapter 16, the NM theory. You remember the assumptions of NM theory. NM theory without tax and NM theory with tax. Specifically, if we are living in a perfect market, the value of the firm is unaffected by the capital structure, or the value of leveraged firm equal to the value of unleveraged firm. And proposition 2 states that leverage increases both risk and return to the stockholder. And if we are living in the imperfect market, there is corporate tax for value of leveraged firm equal to the value of unleveraged firm and plus tax shield. Right? I'm so sorry. And to check your understanding, please do the question 14. If you can do the question 14, what's question 14? Look at this. 14 here. You see? I'm so sorry. I have. So sorry, I turned off. Okay. Now, back to the question 14. You see. They ask you to calculate firm value. If firm value, calculate the firm value if company currently has no debt. So if company currently has no debt, how do we calculate the firm value? The EP after tax divided by RUO. And if the firm uses debt, there is a tax shield, right? How do we calculate? Yeah, you back to question 14. How do we calculate here? There is corporate tax. What do we have? They ask you to calculate the VU, value of unleveraged firm, here. And if value of unleveraged firm. And if company uses debt, you will calculate the tax shield. TC multiply the B, we have a tax shield. But you calculate the value of leverage fund. It's equal to the value of unleveraged fund and plus tax shield. And the high debt level, high tax shield. Well, MM theory with tax suggested that companies should borrow as much as possible because a high level of debt, you have a high tax shield, right? However, why? Why company? Why the in reality, in practice, company will not use a high level of debt? So why? Why the in reality? As you know, if you look back here, you see the firm value depend on the tax shield, and tax shield depend on the debt level. A high debt level leads to the high tax shield and the higher firm value. So if we are stuck here, if we stop here, so MM stated that you should borrow debt as much as possible. But in practice, in reality, company, they will not use high level debt. The reason is that high level debt, you will have a high tax shield. However, you will have a higher financial distress. Now, chapter 17. Look at the chapter 17. Chapter 17, you will study, you will review only the impact of financial leverage on the firm value in terms of the financial distress. Only this. So chapter 17, please review only the definition of financial distress and the trade-off theory. In details, you have to understand what's financial distress. Financial distress, the situation when the company could not meet its obligation. If you could not pay back debt, that you are in financial distress situation. Yeah. And there are the two kinds of financial distress, direct cost and indirect cost. So if we consider the financial distress, well, actually you have to trade off between the tax shield and the financial distress. Here, the value of leverage fund equal to the value of unleveraged fund plus present value tax shield and minus present value of financial distress cost. High level debt, high the tax shield, but high the financial distress. This is the trade-off theory. The trade-off theory mentions that if you are the financial manager, you have to trade off between the benefits of debt and cost of debt. Benefits of debt are the tax shield. Cost of debt are the financial distress to identify the optimal level of debt. Clear? Yeah. If your company doesn't use any debt, or the value of your company here, VU, value of firm without debt. When your company uses debt, when you have a tax shield, this is the tax shield. The tax shield. But high level debt, you have a high financial distress. This is the financial distress. So firm value is equal to the firm use. Firm value without debt plus tax shield and minus financial distress. And here, look at the red line, red curve. You have to trade off between the tax shield, tax reduction, and the financial distress to identify the optimal level of debt. Tax shield increases firm value. Financial distress decreases firm value. You have to trade off two factors and then identify the optimal level. Okay? Chapter 17. Only remember definition of financial distress and the trade-off theory. That's all. Again, chapter 16, there are the two things you have to remember. The impact of financial leverage on the EPS. You can calculate the EPS, ROE if you have EPIC. You can calculate the EPIC break-even. The second main point, you remember the assumption of MM theory. You can indicate outline MM theory without tax and with tax. Chapter 17, only. Chapter 17. Only remember the definition of financial distress. What's the financial distress? And understand that if we are considering the financial distress, our tax shield will increase from value, but financial distress will decrease from value. So we have to trade up and identify the optimal the level get. That's all. Yeah. So chapter 17, only the review the impact of financial distress on the firm value. Other things, they are optional readings you could ignore. Okay? Any question? 16 and 17. Yeah.
So it means that we do not have numerical questions for the chapter 17, but only theories questions?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. Okay. Chapter 16. You can have numerical problems or you need to calculate. For example, they ask you to calculate the EPS, they ask you to calculate the EPIC break-even point, or to calculate the firm value. Maybe the concept check, they require you to state MM theory with or without tax. But chapter 17, only the concept check. Only the concept check. No problem solving, no the numerical questions. Chapter 17, only this. Was financial distress and was trade-off theory. That's it clear?
Yes, thank you.
Other question? Okay. If you don't have questions, so we move to chapter 21. Yes, chapter 21. Chapter 21, leasing, is very important too. Leasing? Yeah, very, very important. And you could have a numerical question or theoretical question, concept check, in the chapter 21. What are the main points you should review? Look at this again. Session 3, Session 5, Session 7, and Session 10 are optional readings, but you could ignore them when reviewing. When preparing the final exam, you can ignore the Session 3, 5, 7, and 10. Okay. Well, what are main points you should review? The first point you have to remember that the definition of lease. What's lease? Remember definition of lease. What is lease? Lease is a contractual agreement between the lessee and the lessor. You have to remember its definition. And you can distinguish between the buying and the leasing. Maybe they ask you, what are the differences between the buying and leasing? You can explain. And you can distinguish between the operating lease and financial lease. Maybe they ask you, could you tell me what are the key differences between the operating and the financial lease? Uh, you have to remember, learn by heart. Was was lease is definition, the difference between the buying and leasing, the difference between the operating lease and financial lease. What the sale and lease back? What is it? Maybe they ask you, could you tell me what the sale and lease back? What's leverage lease? But just have a quick look, an overview. Because maybe in part P, theoretical question, concept check. Maybe they ask you something regarding to the operating lease, financial lease, what's lease, what the sale and lease back on average. So if you remember, if you understand, you can answer. Yeah. That's the first main point. The second main point in these chapters, you can calculate the cash flow of leasing and buying and identify should company buy or lease. Maybe they give you the information and then they ask you, oh, should company buy or lease? Yeah. Or how do you do? First step, you will calculate the cash flow of leasing, and cash flow and calculate the cash flow of buying, cash flow under leasing, cash flow under buying, cash flow under leasing, and then the cash flow leasing instead of buying. Do you remember that? If you forget, please review. Cash flow under buying, cash flow under leasing, and cash flow leasing instead of buying. And after that, calculate the NBV, yeah, cash flow, NBV. And we calculate NBV leasing instead of buying. So if NBV higher than euro, you should lease. And if NBV is lower than euro, you should buy. For example here, after calculating, you have NBV is lower than euro. This company should buy. You can check your understanding by doing the question 1 and the question 7. Try to do the question 1 and question 7 to check whether you can identify the cash flow under buying, cash flow under leasing, cash flow leasing instead of buying, then make investment decision. Company should buy or company should lease. Clear? That's the second main point. Question 7, for example here. What do we have? Then you see question 7, lease or buy, yeah, right? And they give you the information to calculate the cash flow under buying, cash flow under leasing, and discount rate. And ask you, should the company buy or lease? Yeah. How do you answer this question? You will calculate the cash flow and then the NBV and make decision. You know that company should buy or should lease. Question 7. Clear? Back. Again, the first main point in chapter lease, chapter 21. You remember definition of lease. You can distinguish between the buying and leasing. you can distinguish between the operating lease and the financial lease. Maybe they ask you, what are the differences between the operating lease and the financial lease? What are the differences between the buying and the leasing? Yeah. Or was sale and lease back or the leverage lease? The second main point you should review that you can calculate the cash flow under buying, cash flow under leasing, cash flow leasing instead of buying, and then the make decision company should buy or company should lease. Okay? And you can check by doing the question 1 and question 7. If you don't know, how do you do? Open solution and try to try to understand the answers. Understand, explain the answers. Section 7, optional reading, you can ignore them. You can ignore. Here. Other main point in chapter 21. Other main point in the chapter 21 you have to review that you can calculate the cash flow from the lessor perspective, not the lessee, the company, not the lessee. Now, if we are standing from the lessor point of view, lessor perspective, you can cash flow of lessor. How do we calculate? Yeah, and here, and you know that if lessor and the lessee, if both lessor and lessee, they have the same interest rate. Yeah, they have the same interest rate. So cash flow of lessor are exactly the opposite cash flow of the lessee. So if lessor has a positive NBV, lessee has negative NBV. If lessor agree, lessees they will not agree, right? Because cash flow of lessor are exactly the opposite cash flow of lessee. So there is no leasing due. There is no leasing due. That benefits both lessor and lessee. So why in reality, in practice, leasing occurred frequently? Why? The reason is that in reality, lessor and lessee they could have a different tax rate, not the same tax rate. They have a different tax rate. Here, for example, here, Clumsy Mover. This company has corporate tax rate 40%, and Tiger Leasing lessor they have a tax rate 34%. So if they have a different tax rate, so maybe there is a deal that benefits both parties. Or you could recalculate the cash flow of lessor and cash flow of lessee. What you see, we have an NBV of lessor higher than euro and NBV of lessee higher than euro 2. And because both lessor and lessee can gain, have a profit, when tax rate differs, a lease payment is agreed. And here, you need to know how do we calculate the break-even payment. What is break-even payment? If you are the Clumsy Mover, if you are the lessee, break-even payment, that the highest lease payment you can pay. You can calculate the highest lease payment you can pay. But how do we do? Set NBV to be euro. Set NBV to be euro. Denote Lmax. Lmax, that the highest lease payment you can pay. Again, assume that you are a lessee. You are a company. So we will calculate the break-even payment at the highest lease payment we can pay. We denote the Lmax and set NBV to be euro. So you have this. Similarly, you can calculate the break-even payment of lessor, Tiger Leasing at the lessor. Now break-even payment of lessor, that the smallest lease payment lessor will accept. The smallest lease payment lessor will accept. How do we do? Again, you will denote the L min, that the smallest lease payment. And then, set NBV to be euro, and so we have else mean. And look at this, you know that lease payment will be between the highest lease payment and smallest lease payment, between these figures, right? Well, how do you do? If you want to check your understanding, please do the question 8. If you don't know how do you do, open solution and try to understand or try to explain the answers. The question 8. Yeah. Look at the question 8. Question 8. They ask you to calculate the break-even point. Break-even point, break-even payment. Break-even payment of lessor. Break-even payment of lessee. Question 8. That the break-even payment of lessor, break-even payment of lessee. Section 10, optional reading, you could ignore. That's all. See? That's all. Again, chapter 21. Firstly, remember definition of lease. Can distinguish between the buying and leasing. Distinguish between the operating lease and financial lease. Understand what sale and leaseback, leverage lease. The second main point in the chapter, you can calculate the NBV. You can calculate the cash flow under buying, under leasing, cash flow leasing instead of buying, and calculate the NBV to make decision the company should buy or company should lease. And other main point, you can calculate break-even payment of lessee and break-even payment of lessor. Break-even payment of lessee, that the highest lease payment lessee can pay, and break-even payment of lessor, that the smallest lease payment lessor will accept. That's all. Right? Any question? And if you want to check you understand or not, try to do homework. Recalculate. Recalculate the question 7, question 8, 1, 2, 3, at least.
I want to ask that regarding the concept questions. So we need to state it correctly, every single word in the textbook definition, or we can paraphrase and explain in our own words of understanding.
No need to write exactly word by word. You can explain based on your opinion, your understanding.
Yeah, that's a relief. Thank you.
Next chapters. Chapter 26. 26. Okay, chapter 26. Very, very important. Yeah. Please review carefully. Chapter 26. Review carefully. Chapter 26 is very important. Short-term finance and planning. What are main points in these chapters? Again, section 3, optional readings. You can ignore it when preparing the final exam. The first main point in the chapters, you have to remember. that what is net working capital? Only the definition. Remember only the definition. What's net working capital? And here, which activity? You can identify the which activity will increase cash balance. Which activity will decrease cash balance? So if you look at this formula, you know that any activity will increase long-term debt, increase equity, decrease net working capital, decrease fixed assets, will increase cash balance, and vice versa, right? So maybe in the final exam, they will ask you to identify the which activity will increase, which activity will decrease cash balance. And you can identify. For ask you, if company pays back short-term loan, well, this activity will increase or decrease cash balance. Yeah, that's the first main point you have to review. You can identify which activity that will increase or which activity will decrease cash balance. Yeah, and you can check your understanding by doing the question 1, question 2. The second main point in the chapters, you can distinguish between the operating cycle and the cash cycle. You know what's operating cycle, what's cash cycle, and how do we calculate the operating cycle? How do we calculate the cash cycle? Right? Okay. How do we calculate the operating cycle? How do we calculate the cash cycle? Maybe in the final exam, they ask you to calculate operating cycle and cash cycle. Yeah. And you can check your understanding by doing the question 6. Question 6, calculate the operating cycle and cash cycle. And maybe in the concept check, they require you to describe what's operating cycle, what's cash cycle, the difference. Yeah. Session 3 is optional readings. You can ignore the session 3 in chapter 26. Yeah, very important. Yeah. You have to review how do we prepare the cash budgeting. How do we prepare the cash budgeting? Right? Cash budgeting. How do we prepare the cash budgeting? First step, you will prepare the cash inflow, prepare the cash outflow, and then identify the cash balance. Yeah? Cash inflow, that the cash received, cash outflow, or cash disbursement. Right? And I showed you how do we prepare. Yeah. For example here, if cash inflow comes mainly from the revenue, how do we calculate the cash collection? Yeah, cash collection at the beginning receivable plus. Yeah. How do we identify the 2/3 sales? It depends on the average collection period. Average collection period 30 days. This implies that 2/3 of the revenue are collected in the quarter March, and the remaining are collected in the following quarter. You have to practice to prepare cash inflow, prepare cash outflow. Cash outflow like this. Maybe they require you to calculate the payment of account, wage, taxes, other expenses, or prepare the cash outflow, cash inflow, or cash budget. Yeah, and you have to understand how do we do. For example, here, payment of account is equal to the beginning payable. Yeah, and plus a half of purchases. Why you know that a half of purchases? Yeah, because the payable period is 45 days. So half of the purchases will be paid for its quota in the quarter made, and the remaining will be paid in the following quarter. Okay? That's tax inflow. You can check your understanding during the question 5 and question 7. Yeah. So, you see? Maybe the concept check. They ask you, what are some of the characteristics of the firm with a longer operating cycle? The difference between the operating cycle and cash cycle? Yeah. And question, yeah. They ask you, require you to identify the which activity will increase, decrease, or which activity does not affect cash balance. Increase letter I, decrease letter D, or no change. Question 6, question 5, yeah. Maybe they give you a question look like that, yeah. Calculating the cash collection. They give you the estimated revenue, forecasted revenue. And then you have a table like this. And your responsibility is to identify the beginning receivable, sales, cash collection, ending receivable. Question 7 here. Calculate the payment. They give you estimated cash flows, estimate the revenue, and you have payable. You have a payable period. After that, you are required to compute payment of account, or identify the cash outflow. Right? Can you do it? Do you remember? Last week only. Please don't forget everything. Question 6. Calculate the operating cycle and cash cycle. Please review and do it again. If you don't know, how do you do? Look at the solution, try to answer, and after that, do it again. Yeah. See, calculating payment. They give you the estimated sales, and then ask you to calculate payment of account, weighted taxes, other expenses, long-term financing expenses, and so on. Can you do it? Yes or no? Or you forget everything? Try to review. Maybe in the final exam, they give you a question like this, question 8, right? Require you to prepare the cash purchase, cash outflow, cash inflow. Calculating the cash purchase. Question 7, question 8, and question 10. Right? Yeah. Your homework, you have to review 5, 7, 8, and 10. Yeah. 6, 1, 2. The numerical problems, numerical question. And the last chapters. Chapter 28. Okay, chapter 28, credit and inventory management. Okay, look at this. Section 3, 4, 5, and 6 are optional readings. You can ignore them. Focus on the section 1, section 2, section 7, and section 8 when they're preparing the final exam. Okay? Section 1. Section 1, you have to understand or remember what's credit policy. What is credit policy? What is credit policy? And three main components of credit policy: the term of sales, credit analysis, and collection policy. And you know what is credit policy? You know that as a financial manager, if you want to manage account receivable, account payable, you need to establish a credit policy. And a credit policy should include the three main components: credit terms, credit analysis, and collection policy. And look at an example of credit term. It is an example of credit term. 210 net 30. 210 net 30. The 2 are the cash discount. 10 discount periods, and 30 are the credit periods. And you can calculate the cost of trade credit. Cost of trade credit or interest rate. Interest rate. If you ignore cash discount, please review what is credit policy and understand how do we calculate the cost of trade credit. For example, here, question 1 and question 5. 1 and 5. Look at the question 1 and question 5. Question 1, they give you a credit term, 110 net 30, and require you to explain it. What's 1, what's 10, what's 30? What is it? And question 5, they require you to calculate the interest rate, effective annual rate. If company ignores cash discount, if company does not take the cash discount, or what's effective annual interest rate at the cost of trade credit? Question 5. Can you see? Yeah. Section 3, Section 4, 5, and 6. Optional readings. You put it now. Oh. And Section 7, inventory management. The first main point in the chapter 28 was credit policy. How do we calculate the cost of trade credit? Effective annual rate. The second main point in chapter 28 are the inventory management. Specifically, Please remember inventory cost. Remember inventory cost. There are the two kinds of inventory cost: carrying cost and shortage cost. Now please review, understand, or remember what's carrying cost, what the shortage cost. You know that. And you know that there are the two techniques to manage inventory: ABC approach and economic order quantity model. Or maybe they require you to describe outline inventory management technique. ABC approach, what is it? Economic order quantity model, what is it? ABC approach means that we will classify all the inventory into different groups based on their cost, their demand. You will classify it. You will divide all the material into the different groups: Group A, Group B, and Group C. And Group A, they are expensive, but not important. Group C, they are not expensive, they are cheap, but very important. And you should maintain the low level of A and maintain the high level of C. Maintain the small quantity of Group A, high quantity of Group C. EOQ model. EOQ model? Yeah. Remember this equation. To calculate the optimal quantity per order, when you place an order, or how many units should you buy for the optimal Q? How do we calculate the optimal Q? Yeah. Remember this formula. For example here, consider an inventory item that has carrying cost 1.5. You have a carrying cost 1.5. Fixed order cost $50 per order, and the demand per year is 100,000 units. So how do we calculate economic order quantity, optimal order quantity? You know? Only apply the equation, but you can calculate optimal order quantity. That's all. And you can check your understanding by doing the question 11 and question 12. Right? Okay. See? Yeah, that's all. Now again, chapter 28. There are only the two main points you should review. The first main point: what is credit policy? What is credit term? And how do we calculate the cost of trade credit? The second main point: you can calculate carrying cost and shortage cost. You can calculate the optimal order quantity using the EOQ model. That's all. Very easy. Okay. Any questions so far? Now back to right. Look at this. When you log in the e-learning, you see, you can download all the PowerPoint, solution, yeah, and the formula sheet. Mhm.
Bố.
And again, I would like to remind the final exam, it runs for 2 hours. Yeah, it's closed book. And you will have 2 parts. A and B. Part A, numerical question. There are the 4 questions, and it accounts for the 80 mark per total mark, 100 marks. And part B, theoretical question, concept check only. And you have a question, but question 5, there are the 4 sub-questions, A, B, C, D. Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have any question? Is there anything you need to explain again? Hiểu không? Thì bây giờ là các bạn phải review đó. To no choice. Môn này rất nhiều công thức. Môn này những cái công thức nào mà không có trong formula sheet thì các bạn phải tự học. Chứ các bạn đừng có nghĩ là chỉ những công thức nào trong formula sheet thì bài thi mới thi. Còn công thức nào mà không ở trong đó, mình có học mà nó không ở trong đó có nghĩa là không thi. Sai lầm nghe. Mà công thức nào không có thì là tự học. Learn by heart. Yeah. Và đề thi của chúng ta là 2 tiếng để đóng, không sử dụng tài liệu. Có threshold và có điểm ngưỡng, điểm liệt. Tổng bài thi final là 100 điểm. Thì nếu các bạn được dưới 35 điểm là các bạn rớt môn này. Dù group assignment hoặc là online quizzes các bạn được bao nhiêu điểm không care. Các bạn cứ dưới 35 điểm là các bạn rớt. Và nó sẽ gồm 2 phần. Phần A là gồm 4 câu bài tập. Phần A là câu bài tập hoàn toàn, 4 câu bài tập 80 điểm. Vậy là trung bình một câu khoảng cỡ 20 điểm. Có câu 30, có câu 20, có câu 15 tùy theo câu ngắn câu dài. Và chắc chắn là một câu nó sẽ nằm ở trong một chương nào đó. Yeah. Chứ không có chuyện mà 4 câu này nó ở trong cùng một chương. Bây giờ không có chuyện đó đâu nha. Yeah. Cho nên là nếu các bạn không bỏ đi một chương là các bạn biết là khả năng là các bạn sẽ mất một câu. Tức là mất 20 đến 30 điểm. Giờ 4 câu thì một câu sẽ khoảng cỡ 20. Có maximum là 30 điểm. Mà minimum cũng 10-15 điểm. Thì nếu mà các bạn bỏ một câu, có nghĩa là các bạn bỏ học một chương thì xem như là các bạn có thể mất đến 30 điểm. Đó là trong trường hợp các câu còn lại các bạn làm đúng hết nha, đúng hoàn toàn nha. Và part P thì nó sẽ là câu hỏi lý thuyết. Thì dùng từ là một câu là question 5, nhưng mà các bạn sẽ thấy trong đó nó có 4 câu hỏi nhỏ. Và 4 câu hỏi nhỏ này á, là nằm ở 4 chương khác nhau nha. Chứ không phải là 4 câu hỏi nhỏ này là sẽ nằm vào một chương. Và 4 câu hỏi nhỏ này thực chất là nói là sub question, nhưng mà nó là question đấy, trong cái sub cả, nó không có sub xếp gì, tức là nó không có câu hỏi nhỏ gì trong nó. Đôi khi trong một cái sub question nó còn có ABC thêm một lần nữa. Yeah. Thì 4 câu này là nằm ở 4 chương nữa. Để tổng cộng mà các bạn sẽ thấy 8 chương, mà mình có 10, 11, 11, 13, 16, 17 thì xem như là chỉ có học một cái financial distress thôi, chứ còn không có calculation ở chương 17 nha. Thế thì 13, 16 là chính, 21, 26, 28 mình không mấy chương, 10 chương mà 10, 11, 13, 16, 21, 26, 28. Thế các bạn thấy không? 9 chương chính, mà 9 chương 17 là chỉ có cái financial distress thôi. Đó. Để 9 chương mà 8 câu thì các bạn biết là cuối cùng chỗ nào có dài thì không được. Okay. Và concept check là các bạn phải viết ra chữ, không cần viết exactly từng điểm, từng từ như trong ví dụ như người ta ghi một cái definition, các bạn không cần phải exactly nhưng mà các bạn phải hiểu được nha, phải viết để nó đúng ý. Còn question 1, 2, 3, 4 là calculate, các bạn, cho nên calculate thì cứ đáp án đúng là làm, không thôi. Các bạn lưu ý là khi mà cô bỏ PowerPoint lên á thì cô có ghi là các cái bài, ví dụ như bài làm nó homework hay gì á, thì đó chỉ là những cái bài mà khi mình làm để vì due to limited time thôi nha. Còn khi các bạn ôn á thì đó là những cái bài đầu tiên các bạn sẽ làm. Nhưng mà sau đó các bạn phải ôn hết trong cái learning guide của mình á, là mỗi chương nó đều có những cái bài mà các bạn phải xem, thì các bạn có thể xem thêm learning guide nha. Rồi. Hết. Còn ai hỏi gì nữa? Và nếu ai hỏi gì thì cô phải điểm danh ra. Rồi, I will check your your attendance. Okay, wait a minute, please. Thanh Anh, are you there?